Good morning all. Okay, then. Yeah, have you seen that in Bangalore yesterday there was this African student issue? Yeah, so that is what maybe we don't know the actual facts of the case. Maybe he was under a kind of a drug influence that might have led to death, or maybe he was actually might have been beaten up also. That might have also been led to death. That is custodial violence, custodial deaths. That's a huge human right violation. You'll get to know. So there is a topic called as let's say there is a UN Convention Against Torture, so which India has not yet signed. So these are all main topics you'll gradually get to know. There is a UN Convention Against Torture. India has not yet ratified it. Okay, fine. We'll be. Vasu, what do you have to say? And remember, in India we don't have a specific law also against torture. So these are two. In fact, have you seen let's say whenever let's say Vijay Mallya's or Nirav Modi, so all those people's extradition is being discussed. One of the major factors that they cite in the European courts is that India doesn't have a specific law against torture. India has not yet ratified torture. That's why we don't want to be extradited to India. We don't know how we'll be treated in the jails. So that is one of the major reason, or one of the major factors that they use not to be extradited back to India. Fine. So that is one of the loophole. So even last year, if you have, if you can remember that news in Tamil Nadu, both father and son were beaten up to death by police. Fine. So that was, I don't know, I forgot the district, but that was also there. So that is also related to custodial violence, custodial deaths. Fine. So these are all violations against police. In fact, there is a very famous case, which not necessary now. So just go back and search this. There is a guidelines by Supreme Court called as Prakash Singh guidelines. So this is related to, in simple words, this is related to police reforms. Just because it was in news, and just I thought like, okay, let me give it a kind of a relevant information. That is related to police reform. Prakash Singh. Prakash Singh was one of the former DGP, Director General of Police. He had put a case in Supreme Court. Based on that, Supreme Court has given certain guidelines. Fine, just go through it. Not necessary now. So because they have told so many things. For that itself, you need a lot of basics to understand. But just there is a Human Rights Council, District Human Rights, District Police Complaints Authority, and all those complaints authorities will be there. So, duster allapa. This is not good. Where is good? Okay, so can you guys recall the functions of the Constitution yesterday that we have discussed? What are the functions of Constitution? What is the first function? Or how can you define a Constitution for that matter? It's a document or a set of documents which talks about, or which provides a framework for functioning of each and every organ in the country, fine, or in the system, fine. So their powers, their limitations, their accountability, their checks and balances, so many things, but everything will be listed in that particular document. So does India have a written constitution? Yes, what do you mean by constitutionalism? Huh? Or what is the goal of constitutionalism, to put it in simple word? Limitations of power. Fine, you have to separate the power, limit the powers. The moment you have to limit, that means, what do you mean by that? That means you have to separate the power. That means you have to divide the power between different organs also. You have to share the power. So all of them are linked to each other. Fine, so that's the core. In fact, like let's say yesterday some student was showing that, I was asking a question related to, like let's say, I think this is the second time or third time that question has been asked in UPSC. They keep on asking this question as to what do you mean by constitutional government? Fine. Note it down if you don't have the clarity. Normally, I think this is the second or third time if you go through the previous year question papers, they have asked this question. What do you mean by constitutional government, or constitutional government refers to something like that? So constitutional government means any government which is working within the framework of the constitution. Ultimately, what is the goal? Separation of power, limited power, limitation of power. So everything means the same. So that's your constitutional government. Constitutional government means, it doesn't mean that government has to work within the constitution. It is not just that. What is the ultimate goal? Every organ should have limited powers. Fine, so that is the ultimate goal. Will you have a multi-party? Will you be a democracy? Will you be a dictatorship? So that may be, maybe not. Those are all different factors. The core point is, when you say constitutional government, there has to be, or the government should be based on the principle of limited powers. Fine. Or else, as I have told multiple times, concentration of power. Power corrupts, and absolute power will lead to absolute corruptions. Fine. So that's the core or the bottom line of governments or democracies across the world. Fine. Okay. So functions we have already discussed yesterday. That is, first one is to set up basic rules which everybody has to follow, which everybody has to abide by to ensure minimum coordination, all those things. Constitution also says who will take those ultimate or major decisions, the ultimate decision making authority. And in a democracy, more than obvious, it is recall that word, popular sovereignty. So what do you mean by popular sovereignty? Ultimate power rests with whom? People at large. Fine, don't forget that, because these are all very key words. Even in your mains, when you write your answers, you have to keep on reiterating these words. Popular, here popular doesn't mean famous. Here popular means people at large. So popular doesn't mean the normal popular that we use. Sovereignty means, again we'll discuss that when we start, or when we discuss preamble chapter. Sovereignty means absolute authority, ultimate decision making power. Okay. So that is what you mean by sovereignty. Okay, Parala. Okay, fine. Sir. I think it's fine. Is it fine now? Shall we continue? Okay, so let's start with the acts. As I told, historical framework, live but still buffering. Please call Basu. I think for most of the people, I think it's okay. Huh? ನೀನಲ್ಲ ಪವರ್ ಹೇಳಿರೋ. I think it's fine. Huh. First list down the acts and then we'll write the major ones. So please note it down. As I told, this was actually a very important chapter. Every year they used to ask a question. You go back and check in the previous year questions. 2020 was the only exception, probably because they are trying to change a lot. Maybe because competition is increasing, number of seats are decreasing. But you even this year, like let's say whenever whoever preparing, like whoever is giving attempt this year, even for them we keep telling. So please go through this because there is very high chance that one question you will get from this particular chapter. Fine. Yeah, so what are the acts that are involved in pre-1857 era? First one you have 1773 Regulating Act. First list down and then we'll write the features. Then you have 1781 is not a very important act. 1781 Amending Act. In fact, in the original or in the old Lakshmikant, these acts are not included. Even they have not asked the questions also on this. Next you have Pitt's India Act. 1784, then there is 86 Act also, that's not an important one. Next you have this Charter Acts. 1793, 1813, 1833 and then 1853. So these are your Charter Acts. And then you have 1858 Good Governance Act or 1858 Government of India Act. Then you have Councils Act. For everything there is a reason or there is a context. One is 1861, 1892, 1909, which is also called as Morley-Minto reforms. Then you have Government of India Act. 1919, which is called as Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. And then the 1935, which is the very famous act, which is the a kind of foundation for the present Indian constitution also. Please look into this issue. What is third act in left side? That is Pitt's India Act. Okay, you want me to write on that side? Or if I move the laptop, can you see? Okay, I'll write it that side. Yeah, so those who are watching online, I think whatever we can do, we have done it here. Maybe if you have some buffering issue, probably it is related to your internet or something, because that is what the technical team is saying here. So please watch the recorded video if it is frequently buffering. I think it's fine now. We'll continue. Is that fine? Yeah, I think for most of them it's fine. Okay, so pre-1857, so there was this company rule. Fine, if you can recall, when did the company rule start? Which battle, after which battle? You had Battle of Buxar. And after Battle of Buxar, what was the 1765 landmark year in Indian history? What happened? Diwani rights given to the company. If you don't recall, so please note it down. Diwani rights, 1765 Diwani rights given to the company. Of which provinces? Yeah, Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. So Diwani rights means, yeah, the moment you say Diwani, that means, even you might have heard Diwan, like let's say even in Mysore province, even in Mysore Princess there were Diwans. So Diwan means financial powers, revenue powers. So the revenue powers were given to the company, that is of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Who was the Mughal ruler at that time? Shah Alam II. Bahadur Shah Zafar was at the time of 1857, Shah Alam II. Fine. So those are those basic points that you have to recall. 1765 Diwani rights given to the company. So till then, or because of that, what happened? So company, which was completely a kind of a commercial one, so it became a political and an administrative unit from now. fine. So because they are collecting the revenue. As a company, nobody will have that powers. Like can a company at the present time come and collect taxes from you? They can't collect taxes from you. Taxation powers will only be given to the governments, fine. So only they have that legitimacy. So similarly, when they got this, Diwani rights, that means they are getting a legitimacy. They became a kind of an administrative, political territory or a political government. Fine. So that's a completely a historical change. Fine. So that is one. So they were given those Diwani rights. After that, what happened? So 1773 Regulating Act started. From 1817, you can say 1765 to 1857 is one era. Company used to control things. And then 1857 till 1947 is another era wherein the British Crown directly used to control the British territories in India. Fine, so those are two major eras. So if you have any doubts as to the words, I'll repeat those. 1773 Regulating Act, 1781 Amending Act, that is they amended certain features of the Regulating Act, and then Pitt's India Act of 1784 based on that particular person, Charter Acts. So charter means what? Charter is a kind of a kind of a power or a kind of a act given by the British Crown. Fine, even like let's say in 1600, if you can recall, company, the British East India Company was given this charter by the Queen Elizabeth at that time that okay, you will have a monopoly in the trade with the Eastern India, that is the Indian territory. Fine, that is a charter, means a kind of an order issued. So that okay, you go, I'm giving you a kind of a royal order, you go enjoy that monopoly in the trade. Fine, that is what you call it as charters. And then charter acts were there, charter acts in 1793, 1813, 1833 and 1853. We'll go to the features. So this I'm giving you an overall view. 1857, post 1857, that is obviously you'll be knowing 1857, you had that Sipahi Mutiny, whatever you call it as Sipahi Mutiny, you call it as first war of Indian independence, that variations, I mean the interpretations will vary. With this what happened, the entire control went into the hands of British Crown. Fine, even before that also British Crown used to control a lot, British Parliament used to control a lot. But practically in India, who used to run the country till 1857? The company used to run it. Fine, but with this what happened, even though company officials were there, whatever it is, ultimate control, everything was decided by the British Crown. Fine. 1858 you had Government of India Act, a lot of things changed, we'll try to link it to the context. Then you had Councils Act. Why is it called as Councils Act? Because most of the provisions were related to the legislative powers. That's why it is called as Councils Act. When you look at the features, you will understand gradually. 1861, 1892 and then 1909. 1909 is called as Morley-Minto reforms. You will be knowing that Morley was the secretary, Minto was the viceroy. Fine. 1919 based on Montague's statement. So you had Montague-Chelmsford reforms, and then you had 1935 Government of India Act, 1947 Government of India Act. Fine. We look into the features, you will get more clarity. Fine. Is that clear? Shall I raise? Yeah, so let's start with the first act, that is 1773 Act, Regulating Act. Look at the name of the act itself, regulating. What do you mean by regulation in general? Control. Take control over. So that is because company got the Diwani rights, that is the money powers in 1765. So then the British were more concerned about the company's powers now. So that's why they wanted to control the company. So that is when they came up with 1773 Regulating Act. So can you recall who is the first governor of Bengal? Huh? Huh? First governor of Bengal is Robert Clive. So please note down all these first ones in one side. Of course, in the respective act also will tell. First Governor General of Bengal is Lord Warren Hastings. Then you had first India. So that is Lord William Bentinck. Then you had first Viceroy, and that is, yeah, Lord Canning. So these are those firsts that you have to always keep in mind. Okay, you guys told that, or I think it's better I move this. Is it visible on this side? ಇದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಆ ಕಡೆ ಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡು. ಅವ್ನು ಬಸ್ಸು ಇದ್ರೆ ಕರೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಜೊತೆಲಿ ನಿಧಾನ ಹೇಳಿ. Yeah, fine. Yeah, so 1773 Regulating Act. So remember, this is a very landmark act. So of course people keep referring to 1935 Act as the landmark act. Yes, but this is also in a landmark act. Why is that? Because this particular act laid the foundation for British administration in India, or British control over Indian territories. So that's why it is a very significant act. In fact, there is another provision which is very important with respect to this act. It laid, or it started the process of centralization in India. Started the process of centralization in India. Fine. So what do you mean by centralization? More powers to the central government, as simple as that. Decentralization means more powers will be given to the local bodies, to the Gram Sabhas, to the Gram Panchayats, to the urban local bodies, like that. So even today, if you can recall, time and again, at least you would have noted that time and again states keep telling that government of India has more powers, center has to give us more power, center has to give us more money, something like that. That is, center has more power, that is what they are indicating. Actually whatever we follow even today, that is in a way inclined towards center, more powers are there towards the center. That process actually started in 1773. Fine, that is continuing actually even till now. So it has not changed. We are trying a lot because of the decentralization, Gram Sabha, so many things, but it's a fact that even today the centralization is a, what do you call, as a kind of deep factor ingrained in Indian administration. Lot of powers are always with, even look at administration, lot of powers will always be, like let's say at the office of DC. Like let's say most of you obviously will have IAS as a kind of ambition. So that is, especially within IAS, that position of DC is the most crucial one. Why do you think in DC so much of powers are given? Because that position was handled by whom during the British era? Obviously British. So British used to make sure that only Europeans or British are there in the seat of DC. Only gradually later in the stage in let's say in the early, in the late 1800s and then in the early 1900s. So that is when gradually Indians started to get into those positions. The position is designed in such a way that British controls everything. But that tendency is carrying even today because of the legacy. That's the reason you have so much of powers concentrated in the office of DC or IAS. Fine, that's also a British legacy. The entire office of IAS, IPS, revenue services, UPSC, Supreme Courts, rule of law, cabinet, everything, parliament, everything is a British legacy. They have just laid everything, they have laid the foundation, we are just continuing with it, that's it. To a large extent it's all the same. IPC, CRPC, who did it? Everything is done by British. Indian Evidence Act, Indian Contract Act, you name it, more or less all the foundations is laid by them. Fine, okay. So that is with respect to the significance. Now let's write the features. What are the features of Regulating Act of 1773? First feature is Governor of Bengal renamed as Governor General of Bengal. So it is not just a renaming, what they did was renamed as Governor General of Bengal. And who became the first Governor General of Bengal? Lord Baron Hastings. It is not just a renaming, as a extension of it, Governor General of Bengal given control over other governors, over other provinces governors. That is, you have now here Governor General of Bengal. Obviously, at that same time, they were Governor of Madras, Governor of Bombay. So they all were made subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. Or in other ways, Governor General of Bengal given control or extraordinary powers compared to the or over the other provinces governors. That's also a centralization. Can you recall this? This is a core factor that you always have to recall. One is centralization, another one is, for the first time, British was given the control over the Indian territories or over the company. Those are those two significant features that you have to remember. Fine. Third one, Governor General of Bengal, for him they gave an executive council. So first we need to understand now what do you mean by executive. A lot of people might be having a kind of a clarity with respect to it. Executive council of 4 members. I'll explain that, so please note it down in the beginning. Next one, Supreme Court established at Calcutta. Not the Supreme Court that we have now. This Supreme Court is established under 1935 Act. This is a Supreme Court established at Calcutta. And then the fifth provision, Court of Directors answerable to British government with respect to company affairs. Yeah, so what are the major features of 1773 Regulating Act? First point is that Governor of Bengal was renamed as Governor General of Bengal, and Lord Baron Hastings became the first Governor General of Bengal, and he was given the controlling powers, or even he was given that kind of what you call as superordinating authority over the other provinces governors. Governor General of Bengal was given an executive council consisting of 4 members, and Supreme Court was established at Calcutta. Even that had 4. So in books, if you go, they'll tell it was a strength of 4, which included 1 Chief Justice and 3 judges. If you want, you can write those also. In fact, there was other provision which says company servants were not allowed to company servants not allowed to involve in private trade. That is also there. So this is your regulating act. So gradually when the powers or the financial authority or the financial powers of the company started to increase, British started to gradually take the control over the company. So now what you need to understand is some features are more than obvious. What do you mean by executive here? So what do you mean by in general executive? Even yesterday I told you. Executive means implementing authority. Fine. Even today, of course, you have 3 major organs: legislature, executive, judiciary. Executive itself will include 2 executives. One is called as political executive, second one is permanent executive. What do you mean by political executive? In simple words, ministers, including your prime minister, including the chief minister, everybody. And when you say permanent executive, it includes your bureaucrats, because they are temporary. So their service is temporary. I mean, the service is permanent. What do you mean by permanent? That means permanent doesn't mean lifetime. That means still a particular age. But political executive is not like that. They can be a prime minister for 5 years, 10 years, maybe 1 year, maybe 6 months also. You never know. So that keeps on varying. Fine. So that's called as political executive and permanent executive in simple words. And in legislature means at present if you say the normal MPs, MLAs, the same MLAs and MPs will go on to become not just this. In fact, it includes Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha also, plus it includes MLCs also. All are part of legislature. So when you say legislature, that means anybody who goes and sits in the legislature, take part in the legislature, vote on a particular bill. It includes your at the state level, at present I am telling, at present it includes your MLAs and MLCs also. At the national level it includes MPs of both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. Very basic ones, but sometimes you might not be knowing. So that's why I am just clarifying. Fine, we have a parliamentary system that we'll discuss it later. So because of that system, what happens, if you want to be part of here, if you want to become a minister, you should be an MP or MLA. That is, if you want to become a minister, what you should be? You should be an MP at the national level. For example, take Narendra Modi. Of course, he is the Prime Minister, but he is also a Lok Sabha MP, right? Which constituency? Varanasi. So you have Amit Shah, Home Minister, but he is also an MP Lok Sabha from, I think, Gandhinagar or something. So like that. So if you want to become part of executive, you should be part of legislature also. You might be having other doubts, that is Jaishankar, all those things. So we'll come to that later. Fine, so 6 months, all those things. This is basic ones. So similarly, Governor General was given an executive council of 4 members. They used to take all the decisions. What do you mean by executive council here? Take all the decisions of the company. Ultimate decisions will be taken by them. There is no legislature here, remember. Are we talking about anything related to legislatures here? The concept of legislature started only in the 1853 Act. When you write that Act, you will get to know. Till 1853, we did not have a legislature. They only had what is this like? So they only had an executive council, that is implementing authorities. Governor General was the head of it, obviously. And then they had a Supreme Court at Calcutta. Court of Directors, you can imagine this Court of Directors to be the board of directors of the present companies. Like for every company you will have a board of directors who will be the highest decision making authority. So similarly they had something called as Court of Directors, the decision making authority related to the company. They were answerable to the British government with respect to company's affairs. So what is the revenue, how much territory are you occupying, because if you can recall they were occupying so many territories. There were Anglo-Burma wars, Anglo-Sikh wars, Anglo-Maratha wars, Anglo-Mysore wars, so many things. So they had to report to the British as to which new territories have you acquired, what is the revenue, so how much revenue have you collected, everything you should be answerable to the British. Fine. And then the last one, that the company's servants were not allowed to involve in the private trade. You should not get involved in the private trade. Fine. You should only be regulating, or you should only be enhancing the company's trade, that's it. Fine. So that's your regulating act. Any doubts? So what is the core of regulating act? Two features of the core. First one is that for the first time British started to control the company. Second one, for the first time it started the process of centralization. That's a very important point which is continuing even today. Fine, shall I erase? Is that fine? Yeah. So next one, let's move on to the 1781 Act, not a very important act, so just they made certain changes in the 1773 Act. In fact, it was not there in the original books also. Now I think in the new editions they have added it. Fine. So first one what they say was Governor General and is Executive Council cannot be questioned in Supreme Court for their official acts. In fact, similar feature is continuing even today. Governor General and his Executive Council, here Executive Council means 4 members, fine. So they cannot be questioned in the Supreme Court for their official acts, that is whatever the decisions that they have taken in the official capacity. Official capacity means, in simple words, that means whichever decision you take, like let's say, okay, let me increase this trade, let me open a branch office somewhere, whatever it is, whatever they did do, acquiring territories, whatever, Supreme Court cannot look into that particular matters. In fact, even today we have a similar feature which says President as well as the governors cannot be questioned in the courts for their official acts. Whatever the decision is taken, like let's say President signs an act, ultimately whatever you do, ultimately national level President has to sign, state level Governor has to sign. Whatever that the signatures that they have given in the official capacity, nobody can question it. Fine, not even the Supreme Court, not even the High Courts. Similar feature was there during in the 1781 Act. Fine. Similarly, there is another one which says revenue related matters are kept out of Supreme Court. That is, in other words, Supreme Court cannot question the actions related to the revenue issues. Fine. Third one, Hindus shall be tried according to or based on Hindu law Muslims on Muhammadan law or Muslim personal laws. I'll explain this feature. Fourth one, so not a very important feature this is. If you remember first 3, it's fine. Light off. Okay. So let's look at the features. 1781 Amending Act. So Amending Act means what are they doing here? They are amending which act? So they are making changes in the Regulating Act. That's why it is called as 1781 Amending Act. Not a very important act, but you just keep that in mind. First factor I have already explained. Revenue related matters is kept out of the Supreme Court, that is anything related to the money issues. Third one you have to remember, so just recall today, so look at that feature, Hindus will be tried according to the Hindu law Muslims will be tried according to the Muhammadan law. So what do you mean by tried here? Tried means prosecuted. Again another technical word. In simple words, for example, a Hindu, I mean at that time according to that act, if a Hindu has committed a murder, has been involved in a robbery or in a theft or any kind of a violence, he will be tried. Tried means what? His punishment will be decided based on which law? Hindu law, because Hindu, there are so many dharma shastras and all of those things wherein if you do so and so punishment will be there. Under that law you will be tried. For Muslims they will have a separate Muhammadan law, under that you will be tried, because that shows the impact of religion. But today it is not like that. So because now today what are the major acts that decides your criminal punishments? One is IPC, second one is your CRPC, that is Indian Penal Code and Criminal Procedure Code. Indian Penal Code will mention the penalties, that's why it is called as Penal Code, penalties. Criminal Procedure Code will tell you those procedures and all those things. So how will the police investigate, when will an FIR be filed, so many things. Today criminal law is same for all. Criminal law is same for all. But civil law is different, that's why you don't have a uniform civil code, but criminal law is same for all. Again, this is also a British legacy, because you get to a large extent it was Lord Macaulay's contribution. In 1860s itself it started, but in 1781, so there were separate ones. So criminally, if a Hindu is involved in a criminal act, Hindu law will decide. If a Muslim is involved in a criminal act, Muslim law will decide, and that will be interpreted by the courts. That is, courts will use these laws. So don't confuse them. Courts will use these laws, or in other words, courts will decide your punishment based on these laws. And the fourth one is appeals from the provincial courts. That is, provincial courts means, like let's say how you have High Court now. From High Court, where will the appeal go? Supreme Court. As of now, that at least that obviously you will understand. During that time what they told was, if there is any appeal from the provincial courts, that is like let's say Provincial Court of Bombay, Provincial Court of Madras, something like that, the appeal will go to where? Governor General's Executive Council and not to the Supreme Court. Fine, that is again Governor General's Executive Council used to have more and more powers. Fine. So just remember that, it's more than enough. So not a very important act. 1784 is a bit important. Governor General. So let's write the next act, that is 1784 Pitt's India Act. Who's that? So most important feature, first one is dual government was established. Or dual control you can say, rather than dual government. Dual control was established. So what do you mean by dual control here? You will have two controlling authorities. One is called as, so which we already have, what is that? Court of Directors. Then they establish another one which is called as you will take care of and Board of Control will take care of the fine. So next feature was So this is also again a landmark kind of an act. I think it's very easy, you can easily look at it. So they established a dual control. Earlier there used to be only court of directors. Now what did they establish? Another one, that is a board of control. Court of directors, that is like, let's say you can imagine it to be the board of directors of the companies today. They were made in charge of what activities of the company? The commercial activities, because ultimately it's a company, it will get involved in business, so there will be certain laws, there will be certain profit, whatever it is, all those things. So you are responsible or you are answerable to the commercial activities of the company. Of course, but the point will remain the same. So, or when you say this, both are answerable or both should answer to the British government. That will never change. Both were answerable or both should answer to the British government, but court of directors were answerable with respect to the commercial activities of the company. If anything there is a loss, then the British will ask you, why is there so much of a loss? Last year it was relatively better, so what's happening? So all those things, maybe with respect to the structure of the company, the employee's salary, whatever it is. Then there was this board of control, a new institution or a new kind of a board which was responsible for the military and the political affairs of the company. Fine, that means are you acquiring any new territories? How are you running those territories? Is there a revolt in any territory that you are handling? If there is a revolt, why is there a revolt? So all of those things, or the military affairs. How much are you paying? How many soldiers are there? How are you recruiting them? Like let's say, where are you getting involved them? Are you involving your soldiers in wars outside India? So many things. That stories you will have obviously heard. So that is with respect to the political and military affairs or military activities. Then for the first time again, there again a clarity. Look at that. 1773 they took the control. Now look at the way they are terming those words. The territories of the company are referred to as what? British possessions in India. It is not your territory. It is not company's territories. What is it termed as? It is actually the British possessions which is there in India, and you are just handling the territories that belong to the British government or the British crown. That means you are like a company was made as a trustee. Trustee means not like a literal trustee, it means it is not your territory, it is my territory, you are handling those territories in my name. So that is what they termed it as, British possessions in India. That's again a significant change. Fine. So that's your Pitt's India Act, a very important act, this dual control. Because at that time obviously I think 1780s which wars were going on? I think Anglo-Mysore was also had started, I think Anglo-Maratha wars also was going on. So just try to recall your history. Fine. So there was this third Anglo-Mysore war that was in 1790s I guess, wherein Tipu Sultan was killed. Fine. So that's your 1784 Pitt's India Act. Now starts your Charter Acts. So first one you have 1793 Act. Fine. Some 2-3 important features are there. First one is that company's trade monopoly extended for another 20 years. So British gave an order, that is a charter from the Crown, saying that you can have complete trade monopoly for how many years? For another 20 years, that means till 1813. That's why you had another Charter Act in 1813, wherein a little bit change was made with respect to the trade monopoly. So company's trade monopoly was extended for another 20 years. Again another feature, Governor General of Bengal. This started with Lord Cornwallis. If you have seen in books, they give this 1786 Act also, because that year Lord Cornwallis was made the Governor General of Bengal. And remember, so do you know that who is actually at present called as the father of Indian civil service? I know obviously because I referred to Cornwallis, you will tell Cornwallis. Lord Cornwallis is actually kind of a father of civil service. but that was during the British era. So he is the person who laid the foundation. In fact, he is the person who gave a kind of structure to the civil service, though at that time it was not called as IAS, because it was not called as Indian Administrative Service, but he is the person who laid that foundation. But at the present time it is, or post-independence it is, Sardar Patel. But there is another person, I will tell you that when we discuss 1853 Act, that is, who is this? Lord Macaulay. In fact, he is the person who actual foundation is laid by him. If you literally have to give a kind of father or anything, both for English education in India as well as civil service, as well as legal laws, I mean IPC, CRPC, that credit has to be given to this person. Negative, positive, whatever it is, he has to be given that credit, Lord Macaulay. He laid the foundation for English education, for so that entire law, the IPC, CRPC ones, as well as there is this Committee on Civil Services, 1853, 1854, even that was headed by this Lord Macaulay. I will tell you that when we discuss 1853 Act, just note it down for your information's sake. Governor General of Bengal, again, more powers over other provinces. Salary of Board of Control and its entire staff to be given by or to be given from Indian revenue. Salary of the entire Board of Control and the entire staff was to be given from the Indian revenue. So remember, so gradually this is what, stepwise it led to the drain of wealth theory. So who gave the drain of wealth theory? Very famous ones. Yeah, so that is all these features gradually led to that drain of wealth. So those are three important features. Of course, in books they give another two extra ones also, wherein the commander-in-chief need not be a member, something like that. But these are the major ones. In fact, Governor General was given in fact other ones also you can write if you, another feature like fourth one, Governor General of Bengal, he was given overriding powers. Overriding powers over council's decisions. Okay, council means, again don't confuse, executive council's decision. In other words, it means governor, like let's say executive council has taken a decision when they met together as a whole. But then Governor General of Bengal can say, no, I don't want to stick to your decision, I will take my own decision. So he can overrule their decision, he can override their decision. Okay, so that's your 1793 Charter Act. What are the important features that is this one and probably this one. That's it. Rest all will remain the same. So are you identifying that bottom line? That bottom line is gradually, step by step, with every act they are trying to completely centralize the administration. So look at this, power over other authorities and overriding powers over executive council. Gradually they are centralizing the powers with few people. Or so that's your 1793 Charter Act. So next one is your, so monopoly was extended for 20 years. Now make it plus 20, 1813. So first major change was companies' trade monopoly was abolished, not completely, or you can say discontinued. Companies' trade monopoly discontinued. So can you recall those stories? Look at the context. In 1813, by this time in Britain, a lot of protests were going on, a lot of petitions were being filed with the parliamentarians by other companies of the British or the Europe, saying that why should company have the complete monopoly, why should others be not allowed, the company is doing so, is getting so much of control, maybe they will override your own authority. So all those things were going on. So gradually they felt, okay, let's, and and like let's say the other companies in British, so they were actually involved in corruption with the parliamentarians, the British parliamentarians, to allow other companies to go and trade in India. So gradually what happened, because of all those pressures, companies' trade monopoly discontinued, except one is trade in tea and trade with China. So except these two, companies' trade monopoly discontinued. Only these two were done or will be done for another 20 years by the company itself, by the British company itself. Rest all other companies were like how you have now, like let's say for telecom, for everything. So many companies are there. Anybody can come establish their companies. If the people accept it, you will run. Exactly the same thing. Fine, except trade in tea and trade with China. Fine. Second one, you can say Christian machineries. Christian missionaries allowed to enter India. What is the word they use? Even there you would have heard that to enlighten. Native people. Third one, Western English education to be gradually introduced in India. And fourth one, this is not an important one, local bodies allowed to impose taxes. But first three are important features. So what is it? Especially this one. Companies' trade monopoly was discontinued except trade in tea and trade with China. Christian missionaries, again another significant features. So you can link it to that. What is that? White man's burden. So what is white man's burden? Yeah, one is Indians are barbaric, we'll try to civilize them. Yeah. So that is basic feature was that. So the Europeans, especially the British or any other colonial powers, they had a kind of a racial superiority and they convinced themselves that we follow Christianity, which is a superior religion of the world, which is in terms of race also we are superior across the world, especially like let's say in Asia, because the Asia as well as Africa, where the European powers had more colonies or what do you call as those powers, they convinced themselves that we need to go and civilize the native people there, and they took it as a kind of burden, that is responsibility. That's called as white man's burden. That's a kind of theory that, or that's a kind of notion that they put on themselves so that they can convince the local people and keep extending their power. That's why it is called as enlighten, that is the word they use, enlighten the native people, and Western English education to be gradually introduced and local bodies allowed to impose it. The first two are the most important features. I think in 19 or 18 they had asked this one. Clear? 1813 Act. Yeah. So next one. Any doubts? Please keep asking. Next one is your 1833 Act. Companies' trade monopoly abolished. So it's completely taken out. So what do you mean by that? As an effect, company became an administrative body. So it is no longer a commercial one, it became an administrative body. Fine. Second one, Governor General of Bengal was renamed as Governor General of India. Fifth point. And who became the first governor? We have already written it. Who is the first Governor General of India? Yeah. And obviously this person, as a third point also you can write, Governor General of India, complete control. This is like, or you will write an extension of it, complete control over other provinces. In bracket you can write complete centralization of powers. So centralization started with 1773 Act and it reached the peaks in or with 1833 Act, complete centralization of the powers. Fine. Fourth one, they wanted to introduce covenanted or open competition with respect to the covenanted services. I will explain you that, but that was not introduced in 1833 Act. When that came up in 1853 again. So that's what you call it as covenanted civil services and non-covenanted civil services. So these are your three important features of 1833 Act. Trade monopoly completely abolished. That means even with respect to trade in tea and trade with China, everybody are allowed now. Anybody can come and trade. Governor General of Bengal renamed Governor General of India. It is not just a reframing of it. It means, what do you mean by that? That means a kind of central government is established. What do you mean by this? A kind of central government is established. It doesn't mean just renaming the acts or renaming the position. It means everybody else is made completely subordinate to the Governor General of India. So a kind of an Indian government, Indian central government is established with this. Fine, and complete centralization happened. That's your 1833 Act. Now another important act, that is 1853 Act. So what happened with 1853? Open, or you can say first one, so for the first time now what are they introducing? Legislative Council. Remember in 1773 we wrote Executive Council was introduced or was given to the Governor General of Bengal at that time. Now it is Governor General of India. Now he is given what? He is given an Legislative Council. So which consists of 6 members at that time. Numbers are not that important. At that time there were 6 members. So what do you mean by Legislative Council? That means what is its function? Make laws to the entire country or to the entire British territories. What is another one? Functioned similar to the British Parliament. It's more than obvious. Obviously, in Britain, Parliament has been functioning from the 14th century, 15th century itself. That's why Britain is the oldest democracy of the world. Fine, so obviously they had a model, they introduced the same model, and even today we follow the same thing. Today, what you say, the way Parliament functions, in a way you can trace back the foundation or the origin to 1853 Act. Fine, you can say in a way laid the foundation for today's Parliament. Not exactly, because a lot of things have changed, laid the foundation of today's legislature or today's Parliament. So that's your Legislative Council. With respect to this itself, they had another provision which said local representation was given. Here local representation doesn't mean Indians were given the representation. local representation was provided in legislative council based on recommendation of provinces of Bengal, Bombay, Madras and Agra. This is not a very important feature, but just keep in mind, and don't confuse here, local does not mean Indians, because Indians were given the representation first time in 1861 Act. It doesn't mean Indians, it means the British itself, but the local, but the provincial governments used to recommend those names. So they used to recommend that names. They were included in as a part of this Governor General's Legislative Council. Or they used to have different names also, don't get confused. Even if in the exams they use the word Imperial Council, that also means the same. So what do you mean by imperial? Imperial means as a kind of colonial power, controlling, that is referring to the British. It's not the local council, it's the British council. That's why it is called as Imperial Council. Local representation was provided in the Legislative Council, not based on election, not for the Indians, but just based on the recommendation of the provinces of Bengal, Bombay, Madras and Agra. The same British were included, but just these provinces used to recommend. Another most important change which happened with respect to 1853 is so whatever you are competing now, this foundation goes back to 1853 Act. Open competition allowed in covenanted civil services. So you can easily say you are writing this exam, of course now things have changed post independence. So whatever Indians given permission or an opportunity to participate or to compete in the civil service, that option goes back to 1853 Act. Open competition, that is merit based competition allowed, or in other words everybody was given an option in covenanted civil services. Now we can say, what do you mean by this covenanted? Not necessary for broader understanding, I'll just give you for your information. During British time, civil services were classified into two aspects or two branches. One is called as covenanted civil service. Second one is non-covenanted civil service. In simple words, covenanted means superior, high positions. Non-covenanted means lower positions. Fine. Indians were obviously, even before this act, they were given opportunity in which one? Non-covenanted, the lower level positions. So both the Executive Council and the Legislative Councils were both appointed by the British. Then how did they differ? They differed in the way they functioned. Legislative Council is what you call as the law making authority. Executive Council is the decision making, that is like you can imagine it to be MPs and ministers. Both are a bit different, the functioning itself is different. Fine, so what do you mean by covenanted in, that is your superior civil services, and non-covenanted means inferior or lower level. In today's words, if you want to imagine, you can imagine it as covenanted means a kind of group A civil services, non-covenanted means like let's say group C, group D, something like that. So that is what you call it as. Indians were never given opportunity in this. For the first time it was given only in 1853 Act. Fine, because of lot of opposition. So can you recall, we are talking about 1853 Act. By that time what has happened? 1830s, 1840s, you had so many socio-religious reform movement, Rajaram Mohan Rai, everybody were calling that why should Indians not be given an opportunity? It's a moral obligation, we should rule ourselves. That kind of kind of a protest or a kind of an opposition had started. Gradually British were forced to give this opportunity. This provision was actually included in 1833 Act itself, but that was not passed. Ultimately it was passed in 1853. In fact, you might, the merit based civil service, what we established in India with 1853, it is actually much earlier compared to the British. Even in Britain they did not used to have this. So with this what happened after this, so there was this Macaulay Committee on Civil Services. So once open competition was allowed, so then British appointed Lord Macaulay Committee on Civil Services to ask him to give a clear-cut list as to what should be the provision, who should be allowed to contest, where should the exam happen, what should be the syllabus, everything. Fine. So just remember a major idea of it. What Macaulay Committee was told was that exam should happen only in England. So that is the first provision he told. Exam should be conducted only in Britain. Fine. Second, what he told was, exam should be of the highest level. Exams should be of highest merit. In fact, what we today have, everybody keeps saying that UPSC is a kind of mother of all exams, whatever it is. Even that kind of a foundation was also laid because of the standard that was set by Lord Macaulay. He told that people who wants to enter covenanted civil services, they should be of the highest level merit or ability or competency. So that was what was laid by him. When even syllabus was actually based on Western education. Syllabus was completely Western oriented. Completely Western oriented. One. Two, he had also told that it should be a liberal education. That is what we follow even today. Why do you think in your civils, in mains you have right from like let's say history to polity to economics to science and technology, even now you have ethics, everything, because that's a liberal education. Liberal education means it has to be broad based. Fine. Like let's say when you write PG, like let's say postgraduate exams for medical or for engineering or for like let's say economics or whatever it is, will you study all the subjects? You will not study all the subjects. You will study your own specializations. But why do you study all the subjects in civil service then? One is because you need to have a broad based mindset, and if you look at the origin, that foundation was laid by this person, because he said a civil servant should think from multiple dimensions. That is what even today we call, technically we call the term as generalist mindset, and the opposite is specialist mindset. For civil service you don't need to have a specialist mindset, you need a generalist mindset, and that foundation was laid by whom? Lord Macaulay, 1853 committee. All the recommendations were accepted by the British. In fact, for that there is a very famous criticism also, that even today in the corridors of UPSC, the demons and the spirit of Lord Macaulay is roaming. That is what they famously criticize it as, because whatever Lord Macaulay expected civil servant should be like, the same thing even today UPSC expects. That you should be very good in a kind of generalist mindset. You should have a hold on. Of course, that hold on English is still stays, but local language is given a little bit more representation or more value. But the core has not changed. Open competition, highest level caliber, and liberal education, it still stays. Friends, some people criticize that also, but that is what is the reality. So that's your 1853 Lord Macaulay Committee and all those things. Then you had obviously another major change, that is 1857, war happened. With war what happened? So British started to realize that, or the British means the British Crown started to realize that all is not good with the company's rule in India. We need to come up with a landmark change. So that's what they did then. They took the complete control to themselves. That's when you had the 1858 Act, which they call it as 1858 Act of Good Governance. Some people call it as 1858 Government of India Act also. So that is 1858 Act. So what changed with respect to this? Complete control was taken over by the British Crown. So till now, so can you recall till now what is the words that we use? British possessions in India, you are acting as a trustee, you are just maintaining their properties, all those things we used to use the word. Now there is nothing like that. So complete control, complete territory, everything is taken over by the British Crown. Complete control was taken over by British Crown. Fine. Second one, now like let's say the governor positions of Governor General of India abolished. It was renamed as Viceroy. Fine. And this Viceroy was representative of British Crown in India. In simple words, the British Crown will appoint him. And obviously who became the first Viceroy? We have already written it. Yeah, Lord Canning. Okay, before Secretary of State, what you have to write is, till now you had a system called as so with this what happened? Dual control system abolished. And this person, this Secretary of State, he was a member of British Cabinet. So here Cabinet means again, so we'll discuss that separately in other chapters. Cabinet means just think it to be, he was a British minister. Fine. So you can say minister. So this Secretary of State will be a British minister. So I have changed 3 markers, Deepa, so, and I am reading it over also. So dual control system was abolished. So now try to recall. So dual control system was established by which act? And if you are turning the pages, then 1784 Pitt's India Act. So now that is abolished with 1858 Act, and the office of Secretary of State was created. Secretary of State who was part of, or who is in simple words, who was a British minister, part of British Cabinet. Fine. So that is under, he was given a kind of Secretary of State council also. The company was given the power to be sued. So many things are there. But if you remember these major provisions, so that's fine. So one is complete control given to the British Crown, Governor General of India abolished, and it was renamed as Viceroy. He was a representative of British Crown. Don't keep getting confused with words like representative. What do you mean by representative? So imagine it to be, that means he was appointed by the British Crown and he should represent the interests of the British Crown in India. That is why you use the word representative. You are not representing yourself, you are representing the British Crown. So whatever they tell, you have to represent their interests here. That is why they are called as representatives of British Crown in India. And this one, so third one. And then there is, as I told, there is Secretary of State in Council is also there, a team of advisors. Secretary of State in Council, not a very important provision. So just remember that also if you want. Fine, it's a kind of an advisor to the Secretary of State. Fine. So that's your 1858 Act, important provisions. Now there are, what do you call it as, the Councils Act. As I told, what is the intentions of Councils Act? So one core intention you can write, I mean you can you can take it for granted. The intention of Councils Act is, you can say intention is to gradually increase the participation of Indians in administration. So that is the intention of these Councils Acts. So again, so as I told, you can't read these acts in separate. Don't try to look at it as just a kind of by hearting. What you have to do? You have to link it to a modern India. So at that time, what used to happen? Like let's say we are talking about 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, social religious reform movements was going on. Gradually Congress got established, moderates were there. What was moderates calling? Moderates, did they come and started to, like let's say, conduct so many huge protests? Did they do that? What is their major way of functioning? Yeah, 3 P's, prayers, petitions, so those things were there. And what is the time and again, if you can recall, what are they calling for? No taxation without representation. Allow us to be part of your legislature. Allow us to be part of the administration. Get more and more Indians into the civil service. So that is, they are trying to, they are not, did they, moderates, did they outrightly call for get out of India? Did they use that kind of a call? They never used it. It started only with the extremists and went to the peak in 30s or 40s somewhere during that time. Moderates were like, you continue here, but give us more representation, give us more opportunity to participate. That is what is the Councils Act, everything related to. Fine. If you remember this core point, most of the provisions you will be able to link. Now it is 1861 Act. Even like let's say, what do you call as this, 1857 war was also a kind of eye-opener for the British. They started to realize that, okay, why are Indians revolting against us? Maybe they want more opportunity to participate. So maybe if we involve them in the administration, their hatred towards British rule might come down. So that's why they, with that kind of a realization, what they started to do was, started to gradually give more and more representation for Indians. So with this what happened? First time Indians were given representation in legislative council, and 3 members were given that: Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinakar Rao. Remember, even till now, Indians are not included in the Governor General's or Viceroy's Executive Council. That means, in simple words, Indians are not given the position of ministers. They are just made part of what? Law-making authority, legislature. They are not made part of executive. That will happen only with the 1909 Act. So, first time Indians included in the Legislative Council, as you can imagine, as an MP. So, something like that you can imagine. So, Raja of Banaras, Maharaja, and look at their names itself. What does it show? Does it mean that common man was included? So Rajas, Maharajas, Sir. Sir itself is a huge, kind of a, what do you call as a kind of a title given by the British. That means, in simple words, they all were people who were of the wealthy aristocratic families. They were not of common man who were elected by the people. Even they are not elected. Remember, none of them are elected. British just appointed them, nominated them. They are not elected. So don't get that word. So all of them were. The process of election will start only with the 1909 Act, separate electorate. Till then there is no concept of elections in India. Okay, so that's your 1861 first feature. Second feature is the powers of province's governor or provincial governors increased. So now what happened? Now it's a process of reversal. So when did the process of centralization start? 1773. When did it reach its peak? 1833, when the office or when the position of Governor General of India was created. Now it's a reversal. So why is that a reversal? Because it's a kind of a realization by the British that if you start centralizing more and more, maybe the people at the lowest levels, at the local levels, will start revolting more and more. So that's why they started to feel that, okay, let's start giving them more powers. The process of, or in other words you can say, process of decentralization started. Fine. So that's your second feature. Third one is they came up with a concept called as portfolio system. Even this one you have to remember, portfolio system created. Can you recall even today, if you have seen, if you keep following the, like let's say the regional news channels, they keep time and again they are telling that the chief minister has gone to Delhi, they are discussing about the allocation of portfolios. So that word portfolio has stayed from that time. So then what do you mean by portfolio? Huh? The ministry which you are allocated. Like let's say if you say, like let's say so and so X person is given so and so portfolio. What do you mean by that? If you say you are given home ministry that means you are responsible for anything related to, like let's say when you say finance minister, say your portfolio is finance. You are in charge of financial matters. When you say, like let's say you are given education portfolio, what do you mean by that? You are in charge of activities or any matters or issues related to the education. So portfolio means what? A particular ministry or department, or in other words you can say in charge of a particular ministry or department. So that word has stayed till now. In charge of particular ministry or department. So this person will take the ultimate decisions. Every person was allocated, like let's say whoever part of the Governor Generals or now will, so everybody was given certain portfolios. Similarly what we do today, like let's say Prime Minister Modi is given certain portfolios, Amit Shah is given Home Ministry portfolio or other ministries, Rajnath Singh is given something, Nirmala Sitharaman is given something, Jaishankar is given something. So you are given a portfolio and you are responsible for anything that happens with respect to your ministry. Fine. That is what it is. You can, just as a link you can say, every member of council, executive council, given or allocated certain portfolio. So what do you mean by allocated here? Then that means that member will take the ultimate decision. Now today anything happens to finance, who will take the ultimate decision? Obviously finance minister is, if anything is going wrong, obviously for everything you will ask the prime minister or the chief minister because he is the head or he or she is the head. But if anything is going wrong with respect to the GDP, with respect to the employment issues, with respect to like let's say fiscal deficit or whatever it is, or like let's say balance of payment related, whatever it is, who should you question first? You should question the finance minister. If things are going too much wrong with respect to the corona related issues, the health handling issues, you should question the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So because they are made responsible, that is your function. So that is what you call it as, that member will take what you call as ultimate decisions or final decisions, not with respect to the entire administration, with respect to the issue that is allocated to you. That's what you call it as portfolio system. And in fact there were other two provisions also, like let's say Viceroy was given the ordinance powers. These are all not very important provisions. Whatever we have discussed till now is important. Viceroy was given ordinance power. Even today that continues. So when we discuss president and governor, you will understand that separately. Viceroy was given the ordinance powers. Ordinance means you can imagine it to be a kind of, like let's say, a temporary law. When the parliament is not in session, they issue ordinances. Fine. Don't worry too much about the technical details, because anyhow we will discuss ordinance powers, Article 123 separately. And then there was other one also. New provincial councils were established in Northwest Frontier Province. All those things. Not important one. So important ones are three. Indians given representation in the Legislative Council. Powers of the process of decentralization started, and portfolio system created. And the credit for portfolio system should be given to whom? So Lord Canning is called as the father of portfolio system in India, which continues even today. Fine. So that's what I have told in the beginning itself. Whatever we follow today, more or less everything base is laid by the British itself. Significant features which changed with respect to the value system, but with respect to the administration, a lot of things are just British legacy. Fine. Now next one is Councils Act of 1892. Again, can you recall? So who were there? 1892, 1885, Congress established. Obviously moderates were the helm of Congress during this era, till the emergence of Swadeshi movement, the Lal Bal Pal, all those things you would have studied. So Councils Act 1892. So what happened? So because of their protest, a lot of things changed. What they did was, first point, like the strength of legislative councils increased. Fine. They increased the strength of legislative council. They increased it to 10 to 16. You don't have to remember the number. So just keep that in mind that. So gradually that's why it is called as Councils Act. Gradually what they do was, number of members they will increase. Two, within that number of members, Indians will increase. So that is what is the overall process. Second, what they did, like let's say powers of members increased. They were allowed to discuss the budget, and ask questions to the executive. So two things happen. Of course, then another one is there. One is they increase the strength of the legislative council. Of course, Indians also were gradually given more representation. And then the powers of the legislative, the MLAs, or at that time they were not called as MPs. The powers of the members in the legislative council increase. What is that power? Now they are allowed to discuss the budget. So look at the steps. First, in 1861, they gave you a provision to go and participate in the legislative council, to become part of it. But that was just formal. Now what they are doing? They are relatively increasing your powers, and then they are telling, now you can discuss the budget. Now you can ask the questions to the government. Then in 1909, what they told, not just discussing the budget, you can pass a resolution on the budget and say that I don't want this budget, this budget is a bad budget, all those things. So gradually they are increasing the powers. In fact, there was this other provision which said, certain members, this is not an important provision, certain members in central legislature or central legislative council were appointed by Viceroy based on recommendation of provincial councils. Fine. So imagine the levels. You already have a central legislative council, similarly you have provincial legislative council. certain members into the Central Legislative Council nominated or appointed by the Viceroy, but he will not do it on his own. How will he do it? Based on the recommendation of the provincial council. That is, like, let's say from the state government, somebody, they will recommend that, appoint so and so person, then the Viceroy will appoint that person into the Legislative Council. Similarly, they had another provision that some members of the provincial councils were appointed by the governor based on the recommendation of zamindars, universities, board of councils, all those things were there. Not a very important one, just remember this, first 2 points are important. Fine, Councils Act. Then the third Councils Act, that is also called as Morley-Minto Reform. Remember, till now elections are not happening. For even, like, let's say in Lakshmikant there is a bit confusion, I will clarify that. So this is another important act, that is 1909 Councils Act. What is it also called as? Morley-Minto reforms. This person is secretary and this person is Viceroy. Viceroy will be there in India. He will be functioning here. He is in charge of entire Indian administration here. Secretary will be there where? He will be sitting in London. He is part of the British ministry. So Viceroy should give a report to the Secretary. Secretary will give a report to the British Parliament. Parliament will give the report to the British Crown. That is the way they have structured it. So secretaries and viceroys. Fine, don't confuse. This person will be in London. He is a British minister. This person will be in here. He will be in India. Fine. So okay. So that is the reason they have named it. And again, you can go back. 1909 Act. That means Swadeshi movement was. It had started, almost partition of Bengal had happened, so it was at its peak, or probably it had started to come down also. At that time, so remember that carrot and stick approach? Fine, so this is a kind of carrot. That means they are trying to give you a kind of a bait. So they will give you a kind of, they will say that, okay, I will increase the strength, I will give you more powers. Automatically their intention was, moderates will calm down. Then we can suppress the extremists. So that kind of a strategy, carrot and stick approach. Fine, so first point again, strength of legislative councils increased, or you can say strength of Central Legislative Council increased from 16 to 60. Increased to 60. In fact, again, in Legislative Council, remember, there used to be 2 members broadly they classify it as. One they call it as official members, another one they call it as non-official members. So when you say official members, don't get confused too much. It's simple words, it means, yeah, British officers or British, in simple words British, who are part of the company. Non-official means, in other words, you can imagine them to be Indians. Just take it like this. Fine. So now official members, so strength of Central Legislative Councils increased to 60, and they also told official majority retained at the national level or central level. Now we can, I think, interpret it. So when you say official majority retained at the central level, what does that mean then? That means who will be in majority? The British themselves will be in the majority. Obviously when you mean British who are working for the company, for the British government. So they will be at the peak. Fine, Indians will be given. So that means, in other words, greater than 630 people will be what? Will be British. That is what you call it as official majority retained. It can be 40, 50. So that numbers you don't have to think. More than 50% people will be British. So why do they do that? Because they wanted British to have the greater control. For example, out of 60 members, what do you give? What if you give 50 members to? What if 50 members are Indians? Can the British run the country then? Because whatever you want to move, what will the Indians do? They will block it. There will be no law. There will be nothing then. So that's why what they felt was, let's make the British themselves as the official majority. Fine. However, they gave an option. However, provinces were given an option to have non-official majority also. So they were given an option, it's not mandatory. If you want, you can have a non-official majority, but that's left to you. Which provinces should have, which should not have, that you take the decision. Fine. Third one, again for the first time, Indians included in Viceroy's Executive Council. He was made a minister. For the first time, Indians included in Viceroy's Executive Council. And who was that person? Yeah. And which portfolio? So that is what is portfolio. So portfolio means, two words you have to remember. Portfolio means Lord Canning. Portfolio means which act? 1858 Act. Then, okay, what are the, Viceroy was the head of the Executive Council, yes, he was also the head of Legislative Council. Viceroy was both the head of Executive Council as well as Legislative Council. He was the supreme head. Role of Legislative Council not given importance compared to Executive Council. Yes, ultimate powers were still with the Executive Council. So these were all, Legislative Council was gradually, I mean law members, the lawmakers were only gradually given more powers. Okay, so that is another third point, which is again a very important one. Fourth point, what they did was again another landmark provision. Separate electorate introduced. For whom? For Muslims. Again, can you trace back? So what is the context? Because in 1905, Muslim League was established. So the Shimla delegation, they went to the Lord Curzon and they asked them to give greater representation for Muslims compared to their population. Then the British thought, okay, now there is an opportunity for divide and rule, and then they gave separate electorate for the Muslims. So what do you mean by separate electorate? Yeah, for example, like let's say, today do we have separate electorate today? No, we only have joint electorate. We have reservations, but we don't have. In simple words, like let's say when you say separate electorate, let's say for example, in a constituency or in a seat there are 100 people or 100 voters. Fine. Within that 100 voter, let's imagine, like let's say Hindus are like let's say 50 members. Muslims are, let's take it as 30 members. So from this vote, from this seat, if you want to elect, if this is given for Muslims, how many will vote then? Only 30 people will vote and they will elect one person. That's what you call it as separate electorate. Today you don't have like that. Today what do you have? Today what we have is, again we'll talk about those words in other chapters also. What we have is joint electorate. We have reservations, but we don't have a separate electorate. What do you mean by that? For example, if a seat is reserved for SC, if a seat is reserved for ST, or if a seat is reserved for women in Gram Panchayat or ZP or urban local bodies, for example, if this particular, say take the same seat, if this seat is reserved for SC, what do you mean by that? The contesting candidates should belong to the SC category. That's it. That is, candidates should belong to the SC category. But who will vote? All the 100 people will vote. Only the candidate should belong to that particular category, either SC or ST, or when you say it is women reserved in urban local bodies or rural local bodies, that means only women should contest. But everybody, anybody who is in that particular constituency will vote. That's what you call it as. That's why the word joint electorate. Who will vote? Everybody will vote. That's why it is joint electorate. But only reservation of seats will be there. Fine? Yeah, in other chapters also we'll discuss. Just because it was there, I just explained that. That separate electorate. That's why Lord Minto is called as the father of separate electorate. Then members of legislative council, so given again extraordinary powers, not extraordinary powers, extra powers. One is so what did we write in 1892 Act? They can discuss the budget. You can only discuss. You cannot express your opinion. You cannot pass a resolution. Pass a resolution means, in simple words, they'll express their opinion and say that this budget is against the interests of India. We are not supporting this particular budget. So you can express your opinion. That is what you call it as pass the resolution. Expressing your opinion either in or in disfavor. Fine. And then you can also ask what? Supplementary question. Like in 1892 you can ask a question. For example, let's say they replied something, the government has replied something. At that time you are never used, you are not allowed to ask again another question, no supplementary question. But here, once they have answered for you, then you can ask another extra question, ask a supplementary question. Fine. And in books there is a confusion, but take it as direct elections. When was it introduced for the first time? 1909 Act. In Lakshmikant they have mentioned it as 1919 Act, but that's there is a technical mistake there, factual mistake. Direct elections were introduced for the first time with which Act? With 1909 Act, with the separate electorate introduced for Muslims. And even within that, obviously not all the Muslims will vote. Voting power itself will be based on your graduation, your taxation, your property powers. That again when we discuss 1919 and 1935 Act, I will tell you that. So this is a big, because D.D. Basu has clarified that it is 1909 Act. Fine. Even like let's say even in Wikipedia if you go, they refer 1909 Act as the, what do you call, as a kind of foundation for direct elections in India. So what do you mean by direct election? In simple words, people will vote in the election. People means normal people. Though that doesn't mean everybody will vote. But for the first time people voted in the 1909 Act. Fine. That's still your Councils Act. Then there are 3 Government of India Acts that is left. Of course there is so many factual ones, that's why it is taking a bit more time. I am trying to give you the context also. We will take a break, we will finish this and then we will start with making of the Constitution chapter. Okay, now let's start with Government of India Acts. So first one is 1919, which is also called as again, can you recall? By this time, obviously, First World War had happened, so the Home Rule League had started, so all those movements. In that context, obviously, to get Indian support, so they had promised a lot, and then Lord Montagu told that, we will gradually, so what is the intention was? Gradual introduction of representative government or responsible government in India. So this was the intention, gradually introduced responsible governments in India. Fine, and the same is there. So Montagu was the secretary, Chelmsford was the viceroy. So what are the features? First one, separation of powers of central and provincial legislative councils. So this was the first feature. So they separated the powers of central and provincial legislative councils. So fine. What do you mean by that? It means two angles you can say. So there will be separate subjects for center and provinces. Even today we continue. In fact, what we follow is a 1935 Act feature, but yeah, the foundation was laid by the 1919 Act. What do you mean by that? For example, like let's say railways. Do you have railways minister for every state? Do you have external affairs minister for every state? Do you have like let's say nuclear energy or space related ministries for every state? So that means because those subjects are under the control of which government? Central government. But then like let's say at the state level for every like let's say you have Karnataka police, you have Tamil Nadu police, you have Uttar Pradesh. So police is what? State subject. So that's why you have ministers at each and every state. Even education is a kind of a concurrent subject. That's why you have it at the state levels also. That's why you have it at the national levels also. So that concept of separation, you make laws on something else, I'll make laws on something else. That concept started with this 1919 Act. Separate subjects for central and state or provinces for lawmaking, just for clarity, for lawmaking. Similarly, what they did was separate budgets. Even budget was separated. Till then, budget was done only at the national level. They used to determine everything. Even today, now you have, like let's say you have budget at the national level also, Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, presents it. Similarly, you have budgets at your state levels also, wherein normally the state finance minister or the chief minister will present. So that concept again started when? 1919 Act. Separate budgets for central and provincial governments. Fine, so that is first aspect. Second aspect, which is another which is actually the most important one. So what is that word? Yeah, system of diarchy introduced. So diarchy, that means something, two aspects. One, you have something called, and system of diarchy introduced at which? System of diarchy introduced at provincial level. Not at the central level, it is at the provincial levels. You will have two kinds of subjects. One is called as transferred subjects. Second one is called as reserved subjects. So what do you mean by transferred and reserved? Huh? What do you mean by, so the name itself indicates something, transferred, that is given to somebody, reserved, I will keep it with myself. So how can you interpret it? Not exactly, but yeah, on those lines, but you need to be more clear. Somewhere on those lines. Financial powers? No, no, not exactly. Like let's say, huh? Yeah, yeah. So those points you have to introduce. So what happened was, when you said transferred, it means administered by governor with the help of members responsible to the legislature. Here, not responsible to legislature. That means, so what do you mean by that? The same thing. So what you have to write is, when you in the place of responsible, you have to write not responsible. What do you mean by that? So when you discuss parliamentary system, you will get to know that. Even today, for example, like let's say if something, as I told, if something goes bad with respect to the GDP or like let's say fiscal deficit, the members, the MPs can question the finance minister in the Lok Sabha and in the Rajya Sabha. That is what you call it as responsible. Fine, administered by the governor. For example, let's take an example, like let's say transferred subject, like let's say you can imagine something like let's say education or healthcare. They will be transferred subject. So for education, we have already told there is a portfolio system, there will be a minister for that. So that will be, so overall administration is at the provincial level. Who will be the head? You will have governors, governor of Madras, governor of Bombay, governor of United Provinces, governor of whatever. So you have governors, ultimately he is responsible. You can imagine this governor not as today's governor, you can imagine him to be today's chief minister. Fine, don't confuse with the present governor. You can imagine that position to be today's chief minister, administered by governor, with whom? With the help of ministers. That is, obviously there will be members, but there will be ministers who are responsible to the legislature. They will go and answer in the legislature. But here, it will be administered by the governor with the help of members. There will be additional members also part of executive council, but they are not responsible. They will not go and answer in the legislature. That is, in other words, in simple words, just keep it like this. Anything with respect to education and healthcare, you will be questioned in the legislature. But if it is a reserved subject, you will not be questioned in the legislature. That's as simple as that. Fine. Today you have principle called as collective responsibility. That principle is traced back to this particular provision. When you say collective responsibility, what do you mean by that? We'll discuss, details, we'll come back to your parliamentary system, all those things. Principle of collective responsibility means, in simple words, the minister should go and sit in the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. There other members will question you as to why did you do so and so wrong. Like let's say for example, if you have seen the Lok Sabha sessions are all being disrupted now. So because the members are consistently throwing papers asking that you are not doing this, what are you doing with respect to corona issues, farm bill issues, so many things. So you are questioning them. Of course they are not doing it in a formal way, but that is a process called as responsibility or answerability or questionability. The same, you can say in fact, the roots of, in brackets you can write or somewhere in the margins, roots of parliamentary system in India, the roots of parliamentary system in India is laid or was laid by 1919 Act. Fine. And the core of parliamentary system is what? Principle of collective responsibility. So just note it down. Don't worry too much about it because we'll again explain in your other chapters. I gave you a more simplistic layman kind of a definition. So that was laid by 1919 Act. So transferred means it is given to some members who will go and answer in the legislature. Reserved means you don't have to answer to anything. Even if something has gone bad, gone wrong, you have not done anything, you are not answerable to anybody. There is no accountability itself. Fine. So that's your second provision with respect to 1919 Act, which is very important one, diarchy, but only at the provincial levels. So don't forget that. Third one, separate electorate extended. to So what was it extended to, or who all were given additional separate electorate? 6 Anglo-Indians. So who is an Anglo-Indian? Like Stuart Binney. So Anglo-Indian. That means they can trace back their parentage to Europeans. That is their father or grandfather or great-grandfather. One or other person was from Europe. Fine, so your lineage, if you trace back the roots, it will go to the Europe. So that is, those people are called as Anglo-Indians. So separate electorate was extended to 6 Anglo-Indians, Europeans, because Europeans were also living in India at that time, so many Europeans, as well as Indian Christians. Fine, so that is your third factor. Fourth factor is bicameralism introduced at central level. So what do you mean by again bicameralism? You will have 2 houses. Even today at the national level you have a bicameralism. That means you have Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. So that's why it is called as bicameral. Similarly, so it was introduced, even what you have today as bicameralism in the Lok Sabha, so roots trace back to the 1919 Act. At that time the house were called as, of course upper house was there, lower house was there. Upper house means today they call it as Rajya Sabha. At that time it was called as Council of States. And then you had lower house also. Today we call it as Lok Sabha. At that time it was called as Legislative Assembly. Fine. Next one, even like let's say Public Service Commission established. So what we have today as UPSC, so that was established with 1935 Act, but the roots of Public Service Commission, again you can trace it back to the 1919. What you today have UPSC, the state level Public Service Commission, that route. Fine. I mean the original kind of major structuring was all given by 1935 Act, but the root is 1919 Act. Public Service Commission, which is just, what do you mean by Public Service Commission? In charge of recruitment to the civil services. So that was done by here. So that means you can question, so sir, then you told that in 1853 civil services open competition was allowed. Fine, and then I told you about Lord Macaulay Committee. Now you are telling about Public Service Commission in 1919 Act, sir. So then till then who is to appoint them? So that appointment was done by British Civil Service Commission. So in Britain what you have as the UPSC kind of a model there, UPSC itself is again British legacy, because based on the British model. So they used to be, I mean they were conducting this, because in India examinations started only in 1900s. Till then examination was not conducted in India. Can you recall who was the first person who got into the civil service? I should have told there itself. Satyendranath Tagore. Fine, so Rabindranath Tagore's father, right? Or brother? Yeah, brother. So that person, so till then, so none of them was part of civil services, and till 1910s, or I think it was 1925, it was first conducted in Allahabad, if I am not sure. Probably that, 1925. Till then examinations was not conducted in India. So sir, then how can I contest? You have to go to Europe, London, appear and then come back. So then you can imagine. So how many can contest, or how many can go and appear in the exams then? Fine? Yeah. What is a legislature, sir? What is a legislature? What is a legislature? A law-making authority, a law-making institution or a body. Such a simple question also. Okay, fine. Okay, Public Service Commissions was established. So again we'll say that provision again, and then they established a body called as High Commissioner in London but these are all not important ones. First 5 are important, that's it. They established an office called as High Commissioner in London. Certain responsibility of Secretary of State given to him, or certain powers you can say. Certain powers of Secretary of State given to this position or this office. So this office means, yeah, High Commissioner of London or High Commissioner in London. So certain powers of Secretary of State, they were taken away and given to this. But first 5 points are important. If you remember that, that's fine. Again, as I told in Lakshmikant, they have told bicameralism and direct election were introduced for the first time, but direct election was introduced for the first time with which act? 1909 Act, because of the separate electorate given for the Muslims. So keep that in mind. So that is a bit confusion is there, but I have already cross-checked multiple times. So it is 1909 Act. Fine, if you remember this, that's your 1919 Act. So if they want to give it a kind of an application based question, so they will not give directly as to which among the following are the features. They would say the roots of parliamentary system was laid by, the roots for parliament was laid by. The roots of parliament or roots for legislature was laid by which act? Roots for parliament or legislature was laid by which act? Roots for legislature, foundation for legislature, 1853 Act. Roots for parliamentary system is laid by 1919 Act. Fine? Or roots for, like let's say, so for open competition for civil services, all those things is with again 1853 Act. So don't forget those points. Yeah, there are so many committees actually, so that's not necessary here for fine. There is Macaulay committee, there is Aichison committee, there is, like let's say, then there is Islington committee. There are so many committees with respect to civil services, Montfort-Lee committee, all those things. That's all not necessary for Indian polity's sake, so don't worry too much about those committees. Even if you remember Macaulay committee, that's more than enough. 1935 Act. Again, before that, of course, Simon Commission, I think Simon Commission they would have told in freedom movement itself. Fine, Simon Commission was appointed year 1927, because in the 1919 Act itself, they had told a provision that within 10 years we will appoint a commission which will come and look into the structure, or that is the framework of the administration in India, and suggest further reforms. And they appointed that in 1927 itself, because they thought that the Labour government will come to power, or Labour party will come to power, and they might support Indians. That's why they appointed 2 years earlier itself, the Conservative Party. And then you might recall all those things, right? Simon Commission, and then the Lord Birkenhead, and then he challenged, and then there was this Motilal Nehru report, and then Motilal Nehru committee, anti-Simon protest, so then Lala Lajpat Rai, so death, all those things. So I think those points you can recall with respect to modern India. So exactly based on that what happened, Simon Commission gave a report. Based on Simon Commission's report, what happened? You feel like, okay, you have heard, but then you are unable to recall. So based on Simon Commission report, it led to round table conference. Then it led to so this was the procedure. You had 3 round table conferences, remember that? During that time you had civil disobedience movement, you had Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Gandhi went and participated in the second round table conference, then there was again differences between Gandhi and Ambedkar, so it got stuck, then again he came back, he started second civil disobedience movement, but then they discussed the third RTC happened, then they published a white paper. White paper means, even now they publish white papers. White papers means it's a kind of official statement given by the government. That's what you call it as white papers. Even today, time and again, government issues white papers. Like let's say white paper on black money, white paper on unemployment, white paper on demonetization. White paper means the paper itself will be white. That means in other words, they will give that official statement. White paper means. So this is the steps that we have taken. This is the official statistics. So they will give a report or a kind of a statement. So like that they issued a statement, white paper. Based on that again, so they discussed in the select committees, joint committees. Finally, the act was passed by the Parliament, 1935 Act. Fine. Don't confuse all these acts, whatever we are discussing. Who are passing all those things? All are passed by the British Parliaments. Fine. So that's how you had 1935 Act. Simon Commission, I am not writing Pune Pact. I think that they would have discussed all those things, right? Ramsay MacDonald's communal award, Gandhi's Satyagraha in Yerwada jail, and then you had Pune Pact, Ambedkar, and I think what Madan Mohan Malviya, all those things. So that is a part of history. So that anyhow they would have told. Sir would have told stories also for that, maybe videos also. Yeah. So 1935 Act. So what happened for the first time here? All India Federation established. So what are the components of it? One is British provinces, second one is for the first time, again the roots of federations goes back to which one? Yeah, so this one, 1935 Act. All India Federation established, consisting of British provinces and princely states. Of course, princely states did not support it. Federation was not established, there's a different context, but the provision was there. So what is the second provision? Powers divided, or you can say power distribution. So what we today follow is this. Federal list, provincial list, concurrent list. So we follow the so today they are called as union list, state list, concurrent list. At that time they were called as federal list, provincial list and concurrent list. What do you mean by that? When you say federal list, only parliament or only union can make laws. So here union means central level government. Only provinces can make laws. Both can make laws. And then actually even residuary list was there. Today we discuss this under you, we discuss that also. So power distribution. So federal list was there, only union or federal government can make laws, not government, the legislature. So law making is done by the legislature. Provincial list, only provinces can make laws. Then you had concurrent. Concurrent means both. So both parliament or both the federal government as well as the provincial legislature, both can make laws. In fact, whichever is not allocated to these three will used to fall under residuary list. That when I explain 7th schedule, we'll discuss that again. But in general assume, like let's say, what do you mean by residue? In like let's say you might have studied all those things in chemistry and what do you mean by residue? Something which is left out. So whichever is left out, that is whichever is not allocated in these three lists, anything which new subject will arise, all those things, they put it under residuary list. So residuary list, who used to make the laws? Viceroy. Today Parliament will make it. At that time who used to make it? Viceroy directly used to make the laws. Fine. So 7th schedule is taken from So you can put it like this. So today what do you call it as? Or today this is found in which schedule? 7th schedule. Don't worry too much about schedules and all those things when we discuss gradually, so I'll explain all those points. Just keep noting those points here. What is the next another provision with respect to this 1935 Act? At that time they were called as depressed classes. Because they found that the Pune Pact, a kind of a compromise between Ambedkar and or Dalits and the and the Congress, so they were not happy with the result of that. Ambedkar time and again kept on calling for separate electorate because he thought without separate electorate, so the empowerment of Dalits will not happen. So that's why based on his huge pressure, so and obviously British had a kind of an intention or a kind of a strategy also for that. So separate electorate was extended to depressed classes, women as well as labor class. Fine. Next point. Diarchy was abolished at provinces. So and then what did they introduce? They introduced responsible government. So what do you mean by responsible? Like let's say for example, in diarchy what did I tell? There will be two subjects. What is that? One is transferred, one is reserved. For reserved, for transferred, will they answer in the legislature? For transferred, will they answer in the legislature? Look at the name of the word itself, transferred, you have to answer. When you say reserved, you are not answerable. Now what did they tell? For everything, you are answerable to the legislature. That's why it is called as responsible government. In other words, the classification, distinction between transferred and reserved was taken out. For everything you should answer. When anything goes wrong, anything goes right, so they will question you in the legislature, you have to answer to the members there. For next one, for few provinces they thought, they said okay you can establish bicameralism at your state levels also, that's not an important point. But next another important point is there, that is public service commissions established. At federal, provincial and joint level. So to the real, I mean the foundation was laid by 1919 Act, but what we today have as UPSC, at that time it was called as FPSC. So FPSC means Federal Public Service. So post independence what was it renamed as? UPSC. At that time it was called as Provincial Public Service Commissions. Then they renamed it as State Public Commissions. Normally you don't have it now. Now even today they are called as JPSC. For example, when two states will have the same public service commission. For example, Punjab and Haryana, when it was divided, for few years they used to have the same public service commission. The same body will appoint. For example, when Andhra Pradesh got divided, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, same public service commission. So they will take care of the appointments for both the states. Gradually they will have their own ones. For example, you have like Karnataka Public Service Commission, Tamil and all those things. So gradually they will have a separate ones also. Sometimes you can have a joint, combined one also. Right? So that is your sixth one. Next one you can say Federal Supreme Court or Federal Court established. That is what today called as, post independence it was renamed as Supreme Court. Then actually they trace back this RBI also for this, Reserve Bank of India established. When actually with 1935 Act also, You might not be knowing. So like British used to manage both Indian Empire as well as the Burma Empire together. With 1935 Act, they told Burma, let's be a different empire, let's Indian Empire, let's separate. 1935 Act separated Burma, that is at that time Burma, now they call it as Myanmar. Burma Empire was separated from Indian Empire. That is not exactly related to India, that's why even in books they don't give it. Next one, nearly 10% of Indians given voting rights. But today it is universal adult franchise, but at that time it was not universal adult franchise. It was based on what? It was based on your property, your taxation power and your education. But today there is no such criteria. Yeah, diarchy was introduced as center also, bicameralism option also was given. So please explain the sequence of reading NCERT and Lakshmikant. As I told, first go through the NCERT, the same chapter, then come back to Lakshmikant. Directly if you study Lakshmikant, you might not understand, but this chapter you don't find it in NCERTs, so you have to directly study from Lakshmikant itself. I will tell you, once I finish off the acts, how to again more, you have to simplify it more. Fine. So these are the major ones. As I told, bicameralism is also there, diarchy is also there, but these are the major provisions of your 1935 Act. Fine. Yeah. So next one, the last one left out, but remember, the overall base for what we have as Indian Constitution today, to a large extent, whatever was there in 1935, it was just copy pasted into the Indian Constitution. That's why if there is a criticism that Indian Constitution is nothing but a carbon copy of 1935 Act. So they have just copy pasted whatever is there in 1935 into Indian Constitution to a large extent. Like let's say this Federation, this Public Service Commissions, Supreme Courts, like let's say what do you call as this appointment of governors, in fact like RBIs, this what is this list, federal list, provincial list, everything they have just taken from it. They have changed a lot of things, but to large extent, like let's say you can easily say more than 2/3 of Indian Constitution is nothing but 1935 Act. Though the value system varies. They did not talk, like 1935 Act did not talk anything about like let's say fundamental rights or secularism or socialism or welfareism, all those things that was not mentioned or talked by 1935 Act, but that was included in the original Constitution because 1935 is done by the British colonial power. Constitution is done by our own people, that is independent country, sovereign country, so they'll have different value system, different goals. So that's why it varies. Administration wise, it is just same thing. Fine, no major changes at all. Okay, fine. Next, last you have Indian Independence Act 1947, or Government of India Act 1947, which is also called as Lord Mountbatten Plan. So like that. So various names are there. It all means the same. So what happened with this? I think this one you will be obviously knowing. First point. British rule ended. Second one, India divided into two dominions. So what are these 5? First one, obviously British rule was completely ended. British rule ended. India divided into 2 dominions. I'll explain what do you mean by the dominion. India and obviously Pakistan, both were given separate constituent assemblies. Governor General of India became the constitutional head of India. Obviously Governor General of Pakistan became the constitutional head of Pakistan. Fine. So you can imagine that position to be today's president. They were appointed by the British Crown. Fine. British Queen used to appoint them, but not on their own, based on the advice of the Dominion Cabinet, that is Indian Cabinet. The Indian Prime Minister and the Cabinet, they will recommend a name, and then the British Crown will appoint that particular person. Fine. Who became the first Governor General of India post independence? Lord Mountbatten, and then it was given to Rajgopalachari. But for Pakistan, so Jinnah took it. Jinnah did not give it for Lord Mountbatten. He accepted. He took the position. Fine. Constituent Assembly will also act as a provisional parliament. Fine. This provision again we'll discuss when you discuss making of the constitution. Constituent Assembly, the name itself says, what is your function? Constituent Assembly. Your function is to make the constitution, frame the constitution. But now you are given an additional responsibility that in addition to making the constitution, you also make different laws. Why is that? When we discuss making of constitution, again I'll tell you that, because there was no parliament, so they were given an additional responsibility. Then government should function under which act? 1935 Act. Until when? Until the new constitution is framed, because new constitution is not yet framed. So because when did the constitution came into force? Jan 26, 1950 you had the constitution coming into force, but then British left India August 15th or August 14, 1947 they left India. So that 2.5 years, how will you rule? You need to have certain framework, right? Who will make laws, who will interpret it, who will admit, everything you need to have a clarity. But you don't have a constitution yet. So that's why they told until new constitution comes into force, you already have 1935 Act, use that itself. Fine? Yeah, next one, as a part of 1947 Act itself. So princely states were given 3 options. So that I think you will be knowing. So what are those 3 options? Yeah, I think that you can easily write. Join India, join Pakistan, or you can, if you want, you can remain independent. So that's another option. Constituent Assembly was given the sovereign powers, all the powers to amend or to repeal. Repeal means completely delete, abolish any acts made by the British with respect to India. So they use the words in modern India, they would have told, they use the words like paramountcy of the British with respect to the princely states and with respect to the tribal areas ended. So what do you mean by paramountcy there? Yeah, superior powers of the British government with respect to the princely states and tribal areas, that was completely ended. Fine, precisely says we are given three options, Constituent Assembly given all the powers to either amend or to repeal any acts made by the British with respect to India. Fine, including 1935, including 1947 Act also. If you want for more clarity, including 1935 as well as 1947 Act, you can repeal, you can amend any act for that matter, because you are a sovereign body now. Fine. So now we have used the word called as dominion. What do you mean by dominion? Even in modern India, so they keep using that word, like let's say Home Rule League movement. The demand itself was to create or create a kind of a dominion similar to that of Canada and Australia, something like that. What do you mean by dominion then? Self-rule. Huh? You had the power? You had the power under the colonial rule. Yeah, so more or less on those lines. Any idea? Yeah, correct. Mostly that itself. Like let's say you have three ways. First one is called as India was a colony. Then India became a dominion. Then India became. So these are three different stages. Colony means completely or complete control, or you can say completely controlled by British. So when India was a colony till when? Till 1857. Till 15th August 1947, India was a colony. Fine. Completely controlled by the British. So then what happened? From 15th August 1947 till 26th Jan 1950, so we were a dominion. So here dominion means formally headed by British Queen or British Crown, practically self-rule. Even today, if you go back, even countries like Canada, countries like Australia, they are dominions of British. Even today for them, the formal head is British Queen. Because they have always been the colonial power. They were always ruled by British, always in the sense for a long time. So that's why even today they continue to have British Queen as their formal head. They are still called as dominions. But from 26th Jan 1950, what are we? We are not just sovereign, we are. In fact, some people say from 15th August itself we are sovereign, but what we became is republic. So in place of sovereign you can write republic, that's a much better word. So what do you mean by republic then? So who is our formal head now? President. That means Indian will be our formal head. Either directly elected or indirectly elected, that's a different context. But we have no connection with British or British Queen, whatever you call it as. So we became a republic. We became independent when? On this day itself we became independent, but we were still a dominion. So we became independent, that is self-rule we got it, but formally we were still under the control of British. Formally means our head was British Queen. Till when? Till we had our own constitution coming into force, till then British Queen was our formal head. That's why we were a dominion. So colony, dominion, and then republic. Fine. So till from here, from 15th August 1947 to 26th August, we were a dominion, but we were independent. That's why we call 15th August as the Independence Day. We were independent, but we were still a dominion. Is that clear? These are your three different kind of terminologies. That's your Indian Independence Act. So again some clarification, like let's say for example, because of like let's say cabinet mission plan and survival plan, till 15th August 1947 we had a government called as interim government, fine, which was called as Viceroy's Executive Council. So who headed it? Because the name itself says Viceroy's Executive Council. So who will head it? Headed by Viceroy. But the Vice President, the Deputy Head was Jawaharlal Nehru. And remember, Muslim League was part of interim government. Then post-independence, so we had the first government. Again, that was not elected because elections happened. So I'll tell you when we discuss making of constitution also. And Deputy PM was Sardar Patel. So till 15th August 1947, from 1946 under cabinet mission plan, so we had an interim government, that is still India got independence. That was called as, officially called as Viceroy's Executive Council, because it is still till 15th August, that means British is still there in India, that is Viceroy is still there in India. So Viceroy's Executive Council headed by the Viceroy, and Vice President was Jawaharlal Nehru. After independence, obviously British is not there, so it was headed by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Obviously Governor General of India was there, Lord Mountbatten, and then Rajgopalachari. But remember, this is a basic feature which normally people forget. Again, I will clarify when we discuss say next chapter. That is, first general elections happened in 1951. By 1951 winter, that is November, December, and first Lok Sabha in April 1952. Fine, based on that. So till then, the same Constituent Assembly used to function as the Provisional Parliament. Remember, under 1947 Act, we wrote a provision that the Constituent Assembly will continue to act as Provisional Parliament also. Provisional means what? Provisional means temporary, in place of something else. So fine, because you don't have a parliament, you continue as a parliament till when? Till the new Lok Sabha will come into force. And the new Lok Sabha came into force when? April 1952. Fine, so these are your points related to, and in fact some other points are also there. For example, like let's say even in modern India they might have told you, because these are all kind of linked to the modern India, I mean the freedom movement. Post independence or at the time of independence you had what you call as boundary commissions. So who headed the boundary commissions? Yeah, Sir Ratcliffe. For both, that is for both towards Punjab as well as Bengal. So it was headed by Sir Ratcliffe. Fine. Where did you have referendums? Junagadh, yes, that's a different thing. That is after independence. Referendums were conducted in Northwest Frontier Province and Sylhet district of Assam. They both voted to be part of Pakistan. So referendums were conducted in those two. Obviously, then after when we were integrating the princely states led by Sardar Patel, at that time referendum was conducted in Junagadh. But at the time of independence, which country do you want to belong to? In that context, referendums were conducted in these two. Right? Yeah, more or less this is about your first chapter, and normally you used to get one question, and you can't directly remember like this, because even if you have gone through notes now, at least 4 or 5 pages it would have become, it's a bit difficult process. What you have to do is, when you go back and revise, so try to put it in a very few keywords, because obviously I have to explain, I would have written more words. You should bring it down and then write only the keywords in a short pages. Fine, take one single page, maybe one single page entire acts, or as far as possible try to reduce it in a very less space, so that you can revise multiple times. Fine, because you can't revise like this, you can't revise directly from Lakshmikant also. If you want to revise directly this particular chapter from Lakshmikant, you should have revised there at least 5 to 6 times. Until then you will not get a hold. Better write it down in a small page, keywords, keep looking at them, like let's say whenever you are bored, stick it wherever you sit, either in your library or in your homes, wherever. So stick it where you sit, keep looking at them multiple times, revise it. Automatically it will stick, because these are facts. And what is the way you have to, don't look at it only as facts. As I told, link it to modern India. Okay, 1935 Act, what all happened during that time? So link it to Round Table Conference, link it to Motilal Nehru, Simon Commission. Only then you can understand. When you are talking 1858 Act, link it to 1857. Okay, 1857 revolt had happened. British were a kind of insecure about their future in India. That's why they brought in those things. Why is it called as Councils Act? Because they wanted to give Indians more representation in the councils, in the legislature. That's why they are called as Councils Act. Link it with social religious reform movement, emergence of moderates. They were calling for give us more representation, no taxation without representation, all those principles, drain of wealth of Dadabhai Naoroji. So link it with that. So two ways you have to do it. One is link it with the context, don't look at it only as fact. Two, make a kind of a short note. So that becomes more easy. Fine, because this is a very important chapter. Based on the PYQ analysis I am telling, though 2020 is an exception. What is the difference between referendum and plebiscite? We'll discuss that. Those both are tools of direct democracy. Both are a kind of asking for people's vote. But plebiscite is mostly related to the issues with respect to the territorial dispute. For example, like let's say, have you heard? Like let's say they keep on telling that Jawaharlal Nehru had promised a plebiscite in Kashmir. So plebiscite means even there you ask people vote. But you are asking about an issue related to whether you want to be part of India, you want to get out of India. So that's a territorial issues you are asking. That is what you call it as plebiscite. For example, like let's say there was a plebiscite in Crimea province of Ukraine. So Crimea, there is a province called as Crimea, Crimea, which belongs to Ukraine, but Russia occupied it. Then they conducted a plebiscite there. So they asked the people there, which country do you want to belong? Do you want to be part of Ukraine? Or do you want to join Russia? And they voted that we'll be part of Russia. Now Crimea is part of Russia. So that is territorial issue. For example, hypothetically, if maybe 50 years down the line, 10 years down the line, whenever if a kind of plebiscite happens in Jammu Kashmir, asking the people of Jammu Kashmir, where do you want to belong? Do you want to be part of India? You want to get out of India? Or you want to remain independent, you want to join Pakistan, what is your decision? Then that's called as plebiscite. You are asking with respect to a territorial issue. Fine. In general, any issue other than that, it is called as referendum. For example, if people of India are asked about, do you want Aadhaar to continue or not? That is that a plebiscite or a referendum? That's a referendum. You are asking people's opinion. But is it related to territorial issues? That's related to a law. Even for that matter, if a new constitution is framed and the people of India are asked, do you want this constitution to continue, or are you happy with this constitution or not? So is it plebiscite or referendum? Referendum. Plebiscite is nothing but asking people's opinion with respect to a territorial dispute or a territorial issue. Fine. Again, when we discuss direct democracy or parts of it, there I'll tell you that. Territorial referendum. territorial referendum, then it might feel like then that means only, not exactly, because then the interpretation might vary. For your memory wise you can keep it like that I will not deny, but if you write it in answer or something like plebiscite is nothing but territorial referendum, then the interpretation might go, that means what you are asking only people of certain territory, or like let's say only part of India you are asking, so that concepts will come. For your memory wise, yes you can, like let's say code, like what do you call us those acronym, what do you call it? Mnemonics. So for that, yeah, you can keep that, but not for writing answers, don't use that words. Fine, is that clear? I think more number of facts were there. I thought I can start with making of the constitution. I think even in the first questions, see how many questions are there? I think most of them are to just open. Have you guys attended those questions? No. So then attend those questions, we'll discuss tomorrow itself. Fine. Try to attend that question also, means question. Any doubts, please ask. Is that fine? Is it more detailed? If some of you are feeling that all of a sudden too many technical words have popped up, don't worry much, because anyhow these words will keep on coming throughout the doubts there. So referendum is related to governments and plebiscite is related, no, not like that. Referendum and plebiscite both are related to the people. Plebiscite means it is related to territorial issues, referendum means any other issues. Take precautions, don't keep moving in groups. I think you'll be knowing that cases are increasing gradually, so take precautions. Don't become complacent, don't take it for granted. Yeah, thank you. We'll meet tomorrow. I think tomorrow it will be same time, 8 to 11, or else we'll announce. Probably it is 8 to 11, 11:30 itself.